Hey, Chris Lippe here with Mark Martell.
What's up, Chris?
Hey, thank you for coming to the channel.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
We are talking about how to sing like Freddie Mercury.
Woo, easy. No problem.
If anybody is qualified, the most qualified on the planet, and it's funny because I've done some videos on Freddie Mercury on the channel, and nearly every time I release a video on Freddie Mercury, someone says, "You should talk to Mark Martell." Well, it's happening.
Here it is, folks. You got your wish.
If you'd like to go deeper with Mark, click the link below and join his free warm-ups course, Vocal Warm-Ups, so your voice won't bite the dust.
I don't know if you can tell, but we just came up with that name, and that's what we're going with.
So, how to sing like Freddie Mercury?
Well, 3 easy steps, of course.
Okay.
That's all it takes, folks. Number 1, definitely play with your placement and your resonances. Freddie Mercury was a guy who milked his voice for all that it was worth. I mean, he explored everything, every range, low, high, resonances from the back to the front, high larynx, low larynx. Another thing is when people ask me, how do I sound like Freddie Mercury? Okay, there's natural genetics at play. But for me, now, in particular, when I'm singing Queen, you can still sing like Freddie Mercury when you're not singing Queen. But Queen in particular, Freddie had what is called the RP diction or accent. And for me, that's what I do, because I'm not going to sing Queen in an American accent, in my natural North American accent. And so to give that little bit extra of, well, there's Freddie Mercury, the pronunciation comes into play. Mm-hmm. Like the word tears, mm-hmm. which is more of a one-syllable word when I would say it in a North American accent. Tears. And when Freddie sang it, in particular in that line, it's almost 2 syllables. Tears. Uh-huh. Right? So
tears.
To the tears run down from my eyes, Lord.
Right.
So it's a fine line between singing like Freddie Mercury, using his techniques, and imitating. It's a really fine line that I play. And you can really, lean into that accent thing, or just kind of pull the techniques out of it that cause you to have that exuberance that he had, mm-hmm. and the playfulness that he had with vowels and consonants.
And resonance, right? Like you said.
Right.
And that plays into the second thing you were going to talk about. Mm-hmm. All of this plays into the fact that he's always a character.
Yes.
And that feeds this. I mean, what he does with his face,
yeah.
and moving around, and what he does vocally, moving his resonance forward and back, and his larynx is free to move all over the place. Yeah. So is his body. Everywhere.
Absolutely. If you press pause on any live Queen performance, Freddie is likely doing some kind of superhero pose. And, those were signature moves for him, but that just goes to say that you need to use your whole body. And he was not afraid to step into the ugly. If also you press pause while he's singing, mm-hmm. he's likely making a face like, something that's ugly, but that's what he needs to get his tone out, to push himself to where he's not being boring. He was never boring, and that's a phrase that people throw out a lot about Freddie Mercury.
If you're thinking about your own voice, you can't possibly sound animated if you are not animated. You might be able to fake it a little bit, mm-hmm. but we've said this multiple times this week, that your body follows the mind that follows the body.
Yeah.
And so this full engagement, that is the essence of Freddie Mercury. So much is built off of that.
Yeah. And I don't want to speak into something I don't know, because I obviously never met him, but I feel like maybe on stage is where he felt the most himself, and that's where he felt the freest to express himself to the highest extent. And so I think he used that moment on stage to just really get his work out, And also it's a fine line between pushing yourself and straining, right? Mm-hmm. But we also know that Freddie would lose his voice. I mean, he didn't hold anything back, and I'm also always a little bit reluctant to talk about how to really sing like Freddie Mercury, because there's an element of danger in it, and pushing yourself too far for the sake of your craft, and sometimes you got to do that, but be smart about it at the same time. But a line that comes to mind when I think of really getting your body and face and, you know, behind the resonance is the line "Mama" in Bohemian Rhapsody. Mama, ooh. I mean, you're like, that one word "mama" has so much variation within the resonance of that. And not to mention the vibrato he's putting on it, and he moves it back and forth. Mama! Ooh! And the oohs are not just a light ooh, it's down, it's a lower, you would say lower larynx position.
Ooh! Yeah.
Ooh! Yeah, and he's usually sitting at the piano for that anyway, but he's still getting his body involved.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's that idea that you can kind of be this mama, ooh, and exaggerating it in your own body, even maybe more so than you would see him doing it.
Yeah.
So that you get this feeling of getting everything involved. Take it to an extreme, be more ridiculous even, and then dial it back. That's going to get you into the essence of what he does.
Yeah. And the cool thing about, if you look at all of Freddie Mercury's singing career, is that he changed drastically throughout it. He started a lot more leaning into the more, I would say, feminine aspects of his voice. He had a much lighter, thinner rasp in the early days, which I really love. And, you know, in the late 70s, he kind of changed the character he played on stage as to more of a macho representation of his voice, and leaned into the more gruff, more intense, growly aspects of what he could do. And he still had that, he could still do that light rasp as well, but I think he discovered that he had this extra gear of just power later on in his career too.
So what I draw from that is that he was open, I mean, supremely open to new sounds, to experiencing new sounds with his voice all the time. He didn't get typecast into any one, well, I've got to sound like this, or this is my sound, or whatever, which I think is easy to do as a vocalist, right? Well, this is my sound. He let his sound evolve. I mean, song to song, line to line.
Absolutely. Just take Bohemian Rhapsody as the prime example. It starts, Mama, as soft as you can get, and then all of a sudden we're ridiculous with, I see a little, like the fake opera thing, and he's doing most of the voices in that. I know the other guys got involved in that middle section too, but then after that he just powers into the rockiest of rock. So you think you can stone me and spit in my eye?
And look at how, even when he just did that line right there, look at how much his face is changing. When you're listening to it in the whole context, you don't really think about it that much. But then when you see you talk just like you're normally talking, and then you do that line, there is so much extreme going on there.
Yeah.
We got to put that together when we're really thinking about how to sing like Freddie Mercury. It's in the execution.
Yeah.
And it's so far removed from what most of us would normally experience with our face and with our body.
That's right. That's right.
And that kind of brings us into the third point that you were talking about. And that is the issue of fear and breaking out of your normal shell. Right, we've got the character aspect, get your whole body involved, become sort of this alternate version of yourself, and you can't really do that if you're harboring fear.
Absolutely. Singing like Freddie Mercury is in itself an exercise in unlocking your own personal boundaries and what you think are your boundaries, and not being afraid to fail. There's so many videos, like I said, of Freddie losing his voice, and even when I'm struggling with vocal health on the road, when it's back-to-back shows, I remember, in particular, I think back to Queen in Tokyo at some point in the late 70s, and you can see these videos online, and his voice is just in terrible shape, but he's still having fun with it. He's on the fly changing the melody so that he can get out the words. But to see a master of the craft still struggling gives me the encouragement that us singers, we tend to be very introspective and get down on ourselves when we don't think that we can do something, and when we just don't have the gas in the tank to do something. It's a challenge for us it's a chance for us rather to work around those limitations that we have, but also look fear in the face and say, you're not going to stop me.
Don't stop me now.
That's what I should have said.
The show must go on.
So many things you can say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you want to go deeper with Mark, again, click the link below and join his free warm-ups course. What was the name again?
Mark Martell's vocal warm-ups so that your voice doesn't bite the dust.
That sounds about right. Click the link below.
It's so catchy.